Hey guys, tonight we journey back thousands of years to the banks of the Nile to a civilization known for pyramids, pharaohs and gods that watched your every move. But what would happen if Tommy Vercetti, the king of Vice City himself, tried to survive just one day in ancient Egypt? Because let me tell you, the sun isn't the only thing that will roast you alive, and the pharaohs made better crime bosses than anything Tommy ever faced. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from and what time it is for you. It's always fascinating to see who's joining us from around the world. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Picture this, Tommy Vercetti, the man who built a criminal empire in 1980s Vice City, wakes up not in his luxury mansion overlooking the ocean, but on a scratchy straw mat in a mud brick hut somewhere along the Nile in 1350 BCE. The air conditioning that usually keeps his Scarface-inspired mansion cool is gone. Instead, there's a blast furnace called the Egyptian sun that's already turning his surroundings into an oven, and it's not even breakfast time yet. Tommy might have survived Sonny Forelli's betrayal, outmaneuvered Colonel Cortez, and built Vice City's most feared criminal organization, but ancient Egypt, that's a completely different game. This is a world where organized crime wasn't something you built from the streets up, it was the government. Where corruption wasn't a tool to gain power, corruption was power, handed down by the gods themselves. Tommy's first instinct would be to take stock of his situation. In Vice City, he always had his Hawaiian shirts, his arsenal of weapons, and his fleet of cars. Here, he's got a linen tunic that feels like wearing tissue paper in a sauna, and the closest thing to transportation is a donkey that probably costs more than his first car back in Liberty City. The man who once commanded respect through fear and violence is about to discover that ancient Egypt had perfected both arts thousands of years before he was even born. But let's start with the basics. Tommy's used to waking up in comfort, rolling out of bed in his silk pajamas, maybe grabbing a coffee while planning his next real estate acquisition, or deciding which rival gang needed to disappear. In ancient Egypt, waking up means immediate assault by the sun god Ra, who apparently never heard of mercy. The desert sun doesn't just rise, it attacks. By 6 a.m. the temperature is already climbing toward what Tommy would consider unbearable, and it's only the beginning. Tommy's always been a sharp dresser, whether it's his iconic pink and blue suits, or his casual beachwear. But ancient Egyptian fashion, that's a whole different story. Everyone wears linen, and not the expensive kind Tommy might recognize from his high-end suits. This is rough, scratchy linen that offers about as much protection from the elements as a paper towel offers protection from a Tommy gun. The wealthy might have softer, finer linen, but they didn't hand out luxury fabrics to strangers who appeared mysteriously in the desert. And the heat, oh, the heat. Tommy's used to Florida sunshine, sure, but ancient Egypt takes it to another level. This isn't the humid heat of Vice City where you can at least jump in a pool or crank up the AC. This is dry, relentless, cooking heat that feels like standing too close to an industrial furnace. The kind of heat that makes Tommy's famous temper seem like a cool breeze by comparison. Tommy would quickly realize he's not in Kansas anymore, or Vice City, for that matter. The organizational structures he's used to simply don't exist. No police to bribe, no corrupt officials to buy off, no rival gangs to intimidate or absorb into his operation. Instead, there's a pharaoh who literally claims to be a god, backed by a priesthood that makes the Italian-American mob look like a neighborhood book club. In Vice City, Tommy could buy his way out of trouble. Got heat from the cops? Bribe them. Government official causing problem. Make a donation to their favorite charity, if you know what I mean. But in ancient Egypt, the power structure is completely different. The pharaoh isn't just politically powerful, he's supposedly divine. You can't bribe a god, and you certainly can't intimidate one. Tommy's first real challenge would come with breakfast. In Vice City, he might grab a Cuban coffee and a pastry, or have his chef prepare something elaborate. In ancient Egypt, breakfast is bread, period, and not the soft fluffy bread Tommy might be used to. This is dense, coarse bread made from emmer wheat or barley, often containing sand from the grinding stones. Literally crunchy bread, not by design, but by necessity. Then there's the beer. In ancient Egypt, everyone drinks beer, men, women, children. It's safer than water, which should tell Tommy everything he needs to know about the water quality. This isn't the crisp beer he might enjoy on his mansion's patio. This is thick, cloudy, lukewarm liquid bread. Think medieval smoothie, with a hint of fermentation and a texture that would make Tommy question every life choice that brought him to this moment. Tommy's used to commanding respect through a combination of charisma, fear, and violence. In Vice City, people knew who he was. They knew what he was capable of. But in ancient Egypt, he's nobody. Just another foreigner who doesn't speak the language, doesn't understand the customs, and definitely doesn't comprehend the complex religious and political hierarchies that govern every aspect of daily life. The language barrier alone would drive Tommy crazy. He's a man who needs to communicate, to give orders, to make deals. But hieroglyphics aren't something you pick up overnight, and ancient Egyptian isn't exactly offered on language learning apps. Tommy's sharp tongue, which served him so well in negotiations and intimidation back in Vice City, is useless here. Let's talk about the real power structure Tommy would encounter. In Vice City, Tommy worked his way up from being Sonny's expendable lieutenant to becoming the kingpin of his own operation. He understood how crime families worked, how to navigate the relationships between different factions, how to play various groups against each other. But ancient Egypt's power structure would baffle him completely. At the top is the pharaoh Midian, not just a political leader, but a living god. Below him are the priests, who control vast wealth and land. Then come the nobles, the administrators, the scribes. Tommy would find himself somewhere near the bottom, barely above the slaves, and that's a position he wouldn't tolerate for a minute in Vice City. But here, there's no climbing the ladder through violence or cunning. The system is locked, backed by divine authority. Tommy's used to solving problems with bullets. Someone doesn't pay their debt, send some muscle. A rival moves in on your territory, start a war. A politician doesn't stay bought, arrange an accident. But in ancient Egypt, violence has to be sanctioned by the right authorities. You can't just start shooting up the place when you're dealing with people who believe the pharaoh is literally Horus in human form. The bureaucracy alone would drive Tommy insane. In Vice City, he could cut through red tape with money, threats, or both. Need a building permit, bribe the right official, want the cops to look the other way, put the right amount in the right pockets. But Egyptian bureaucracy is religious bureaucracy, backed by the combined weight of church and state, because in ancient Egypt, they're the same thing. Tommy's business model in Vice City was built on diversification, real estate, protection rackets, drug trafficking, legitimate businesses as fronts. But in ancient Egypt, most trade is controlled by the state or the temples. There's no black market for Tommy to exploit, no underground economy for him to dominate. The pharaoh owns everything, and what he doesn't own directly, he controls through divine authority. The physical challenges would be brutal for Tommy. He's used to air conditioning, cold drinks, comfortable transportation. In ancient Egypt, he'd be walking everywhere in blinding heat, drinking warm beer, and sleeping on straw mats. The man who once had a garage full of sports cars now has to worry about whether he can afford sandals. Tommy's always been a creature of habit. Morning routine, business meetings, evening entertainment, all carefully scheduled and controlled. But in ancient Egypt, the day begins before dawn because it's the only time it's cool enough to work. Everyone's schedule revolves around the sun, and the sun doesn't care about Tommy's preferences. The food situation would horrify Tommy. In Vice City, he could get cuisine from around the world. Cuban food, Italian specialties, American classics, whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted it. In ancient Egypt, if you're not wealthy, you eat bread, onions, and maybe some fish if you're lucky. Meat is reserved for festivals and the wealthy. Tommy would go from dining in the finest restaurants to fighting over scraps. Water is another constant problem. In Vice City, Tommy never had to think about water. Turn a tap, grab a bottle from the fridge, jump in a pool. In ancient Egypt, water comes from the Nile, and it's shared with everything else: people, animals, sewage, and the occasional crocodile. The idea of pure, filtered water is about as foreign as air conditioning. Tommy's health would deteriorate rapidly. He's used to modern medicine, hospitals, and a lifestyle that, while stressful, doesn't involve physical labor under the desert sun. In ancient Egypt, he'd be dealing with diseases that were wiped out centuries ago, and the medical treatment involves as much prayer as actual medicine. The social aspects would be equally challenging. Tommy's used to being the alpha in every room he enters. People defer to him out of fear, respect, or both. But in ancient Egypt, Social hierarchy is rigid and divinely ordained. Tommy can't just buy his way up the social ladder or intimidate his way to the top. He's a foreigner, which automatically puts him at a disadvantage that no amount of Vice City swagger can overcome. Tommy's relationship with violence would have to change completely. In Vice City, controlled violence was a tool of business. Rough up someone who owes money, eliminate a rival, make an example of someone who crossed you. But in ancient Egypt, unauthorized violence against anyone of higher social status could result in death, and higher social status includes pretty much everyone. The entertainment options would depress Tommy. No nightclubs, no sports cars, no cocaine-fueled parties. Entertainment in ancient Egypt consists of religious festivals, the occasional feast if you're important enough to be invited, and that's about it. Tommy's used to a lifestyle of excess, luxury, and constant stimulation. Ancient Egypt offers meditation, prayer, and hoping you don't die of dysentery. Tommy's used to controlling his environment. Climate-controlled buildings, security systems, armed bodyguards. In ancient Egypt, your security depends on not offending anyone more powerful than you, which is basically everyone. Your climate control is hiding in whatever shade you can find. Your comfort depends on factors completely outside your control. The concept of time would drive Tommy crazy. In Vice City, he operated on business hours, meeting schedules, and precise timing for operations. Ancient Egypt runs on natural cycles. Wake with the sun, work until it's too hot, rest during midday, work again in the evening, sleep when it's dark. No clocks, no schedules, no precision timing. Tommy's network of associates, informants, and employees simply doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. He'd have to start from scratch, but without the cultural knowledge, language skills, or understanding of social norms necessary to build any kind of organization. He's like a mafia boss trying to operate in a completely alien society. The religious aspect would be particularly challenging for Tommy. In Vice City, religion might be something you pay lip service to, maybe attend church on Easter and Christmas. But in ancient Egypt, religion permeates every aspect of daily life. You can't avoid it, ignore it, or pay someone to make it go away. The gods are everywhere, and disrespecting them has real, immediate consequences. Tommy's problem-solving skills, which served him so well in criminal enterprise, are useless here. Can't bribe the sun to be less hot. Can't intimidate the Nile into providing cleaner water. Can't negotiate with diseases or natural disasters. All the urban survival skills that made him king of Vice City's underworld are meaningless in the ancient world. The transportation situation would frustrate Tommy beyond belief. Gone are the fast cars, the boats, the helicopters. In ancient Egypt, you walk, or if you're extremely fortunate, you might get to ride a donkey. The man who once had a collection of sports cars now struggles to afford sandals that won't fall apart in the sand. Tommy's used to modern conveniences that ancient Egyptians couldn't even imagine. Hot and cold running water, electricity, refrigeration, communications technology. In ancient Egypt, if you want cold water, you wait for night and hope some evaporates from a clay pot. If you want to send a message, you find someone who can walk there and hope they survive the journey. The economic systems would confuse Tommy completely. In Vice City, he understood currency, banks, credit, investments. Ancient Egypt operates largely on barter systems, with the state controlling most trade. There's no stock market to manipulate, no banks to rob, no economic leverage to be gained through the methods Tommy knows. Tommy's leadership style, which worked perfectly for a criminal organization, is completely inappropriate for ancient Egyptian society. He can't just shoot someone for disrespecting him. He can't hostile take over someone's business. He can't eliminate competition through violence. All the tools that made him successful are not just useless, but actively dangerous in this new environment. The hygiene situation alone would break Tommy. He's used to daily showers, clean clothes, grooming products. In ancient Egypt, you're lucky if you get to bathe in the Nile once a week, and the water you're bathing in is the same water everyone else is bathing in, plus whatever the animals have contributed. Tommy's famous temper, which he learned to control and use strategically in Vice City, would be his downfall in ancient Egypt. Lose your temper with the wrong person, and you might find yourself conscripted into building the next pyramid. Or worse, you might find yourself on the wrong end of ancient Egyptian justice, which makes modern legal systems look like traffic court. The concept of privacy, which Tommy values highly, simply doesn't exist for most people in ancient Egypt. You live in close quarters with family, animals, and neighbors. Everyone knows everyone's business. Tommy can't retreat to his mansion when he needs time to think or plot his next move. Tommy's sophisticated understanding of psychology and human nature, which he used to manipulate people in Vice City, is limited by cultural barriers in ancient Egypt. He doesn't understand the cultural triggers, the social norms, the religious taboos that influence behavior. He's operating blind in a complex social system. The workforce that Tommy relied on in Vice City, making skilled professionals, specialists, tech experts, doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. Need someone killed, you can't just call a professional hitman. Need something stolen, there's no crew of specialists. Need intelligence on arrival, there's no network of informants to call upon. Tommy's used to being able to solve most problems with money, but in ancient Egypt, money as he understands it doesn't exist. Currency is mostly grain, cattle, and other commodities. You can't just pull out a wad of cash to solve your problems. And even if you could, the things Tommy most desperately needs, any air conditioning, modern medicine, a way home, simply cannot be bought at any price. The judicial system would horrify Tommy. In Vice City, he could work within the legal system, corrupt it, circumvent it, or simply overpower it with resources. But ancient Egyptian law is based on religious principles he doesn't understand, administered by officials he can't influence, and backed by divine authority he can't challenge. Tommy's intelligence network, which kept him informed of threats and opportunities in Vice City, doesn't exist here. He's operating completely blind, without any way to gather information about potential allies, enemies, or opportunities. He's used to knowing everything that happens in his territory, but in ancient Egypt, he doesn't even know what's happening in the next village. The technological limitations would frustrate Tommy immensely. No phones, no computers, no cars, no guns, no modern weapons of any kind. All the technological advantages that gave him an edge in Vice City are gone. He's been reduced to the technological level of the Bronze Age, and it shows in every aspect of daily life. Tommy's strategic thinking, which allowed him to plan complex operations in Vice City, is limited by his lack of understanding of ancient Egyptian culture, geography, and resources. He can't plan for contingencies he doesn't understand, and he can't anticipate reactions based on cultural norms he doesn't know. The class system in ancient Egypt is rigid and divinely ordained in a way that would alien to Tommy. In Vice City, he could rise through the ranks through intelligence, violence, and cunning. But in ancient Egypt, your social status is largely fixed from birth, and moving up requires navigating complex religious and political channels that Tommy doesn't understand. Tommy's used to immediate gratification and quick results. In Vice City, if he wanted something done, it happened quickly. But ancient Egypt operates at a much slower pace. Everything takes time, travel, communication, construction, political maneuvering. Tommy's impatience would be a major liability in a culture that thinks in terms of generations rather than quarters. The military situation would be particularly challenging for Tommy. In Vice City, he could assemble armed teams quickly, equip them with modern weapons, and deploy them tactically. But ancient Egyptian military service is often conscripted, and foreigners like Tommy would be more likely to end up as forced labor than as military leaders. Tommy's retail and business experience, which helped him build a legitimate empire to front his illegal activities, is useless in an economy where the state controls most commerce. There's no private enterprise as he understands it, no free market to exploit, no business regulations to circumvent. The medicine situation would terrify Tommy. In Vice City, he had access to world-class healthcare. In ancient Egypt, medical treatment involves as much magic as medicine. Doctors prescribe prayers alongside herbs, and surgery is performed without anesthesia. Tommy's used to quick fixes and modern solutions, not religious healing rituals. Tommy's negotiation skills, which served him well in Vice City's complex criminal relationships, are hampered by language barriers and cultural misunderstandings in ancient Egypt. He can't read people the way he's used to because he doesn't understand the cultural context of their behavior. The entertainment and leisure industries that Tommy controlled in Vice City simply don't exist in ancient Egypt. No casinos, no nightclubs, no strip clubs, no drug trade. Entertainment is mostly religious festivals and the occasional feast. Tommy's used to a world of constant stimulation and pleasure, not a world of religious devotion and hard work. Tommy's security concerns in Vice City were about rival gangs, corrupt cops, and federal investigations. In ancient Egypt, his security concerns include wild animals, diseases, natural disasters, and the whims of gods and pharaohs. It's a completely different threat assessment. The communication systems that Tommy relied on in Vice City, Volsmo's radios, trusted messengers, don't exist in ancient Egypt. Messages are carried by foot or boat, taking days or weeks to arrive. Tommy can't coordinate complex operations when communication is this slow and unreliable. Tommy's financial management skills, which allowed him to launder money and manage multiple business interests, are irrelevant in an economy that's largely cash-free and state-controlled. There's no banking system to manipulate, no financial instruments to exploit. The urban environment that Tommy mastered in Vice City knows knowing every street, every building, every power player, is replaced by a rural, agricultural society that he doesn't understand. Tommy's urban survival skills don't translate to rural, ancient Egypt. Tommy's used to being able to buy loyalty, either through payment or intimidation. But in ancient Egypt, loyalty is often based on kinship, religious devotion, or fear of divine retribution, forces that Tommy can't easily manipulate. The concept of territory, which was so important to Tommy's operations in Vice City, is completely different in ancient Egypt. Land belongs to the pharaoh or the temples, and control is exercised through divine right rather than military force. Tommy's expertise in managing criminal enterprises, understanding markets, controlling supply chains, eliminating competition, is useless in a society where the government controls most economic activity and competition is often suppressed by religious authority. The transportation networks that Tommy used to move products and people around Vice City don't exist in ancient Egypt. Roads are basic tracks, river travel is slow and dangerous, and there's no infrastructure for rapid movement of goods or people. Tommy's understanding of human psychology and motivation, which helped him build loyalty and fear in Vice City, is limited by cultural barriers in ancient Egypt. He doesn't understand what motivates people in this society, what they fear, what they desire. The legal system that Tommy learned to navigate and corrupt in Vice City is replaced by religious law that he doesn't understand. There are no lawyers to hire, no judges to bribe, no appeals process to exploit. Justice is swift, simple, and often brutal. Tommy's technological sophistication, which gave him advantages in Vice City, is meaningless in ancient Egypt. His knowledge of modern weapons, vehicles, communications, and surveillance technology is useless in a Bronze Age society. The political connections that Tommy cultivated in Vice City don't exist in ancient Egypt. He doesn't know anyone, no one knows him, and the political system operates on principles he doesn't understand. Tommy's risk management strategies, which helped him survive in Vice City's dangerous underworld, are inadequate for ancient Egypt's different dangers. He knows how to deal with crime bosses and corrupt officials, but not with pharaohs who claim divine authority. The supply chains that Tommy controlled in Vice City, weapons, drugs, stolen goods, don't exist in ancient Egypt. There's no black market economy for him to exploit, no underground networks to tap into. Tommy's crisis management skills, which helped him survive betrayals and wars in Vice City, are tested by crises he doesn't understand in ancient Egypt. Natural disasters, religious upheavals, and divine proclamations are outside his experience. The intelligence-gathering techniques that Tommy used in Vice City, pharaohs and informants, intelligence networks, are impossible in ancient Egypt. There's no technology for remote surveillance, no professional spy networks, no institutional intelligence apparatus. Tommy's conflict resolution strategies, which involved negotiation, intimidation, or elimination, are constrained by ancient Egyptian social norms. He can't simply kill his way to a solution when the social order is backed by divine authority. The market analysis skills that helped Tommy identify opportunities in Vice City are useless in ancient Egypt's controlled economy. There are no free markets to analyze, no consumer demand to exploit, no economic niches to fill. Tommy's habit of surrounding himself with competent specialists and accountants, lawyers, enforcers, technical experts is frustrated in ancient Egypt, where such specializations barely exist. There are no modern professional services to hire. The contingency planning that kept Tommy's empire running in Vice City becomes nearly impossible in ancient Egypt, where he lacks basic information about the environment, culture, and systems he's dealing with. Tommy's brand management and reputation building, which were crucial to his success in Vice City, are meaningless in a society where reputation is based on divine favor and social status rather than criminal achievement. The competitive analysis that Tommy used to stay ahead of rival families in Vice City is impossible when he doesn't understand the power structures, alliances, and conflicts of ancient Egyptian society. Tommy's succession planning and organizational structure, which ensured his empire's continuity in Vice City, are irrelevant in a society where power is inherited through divine bloodlines rather than earned through criminal enterprise. As the day wears on, Tommy would realize that every skill that made him successful in Vice City is either useless or actively dangerous in ancient Egypt. He's not just out of his element, he's in a completely different universe. The man who conquered Vice City's criminal underworld can't even figure out how to get a decent meal or a comfortable place to sleep in ancient Egypt. The physical toll alone would break Tommy. He's used to a life of relative comfort and luxury. Private pools to cool off, ice-cold drinks, air conditioning, modern medicine when needed. In ancient Egypt, he's constantly hot, constantly thirsty, constantly uncomfortable, and constantly at risk of disease, injury, or death from 100 different causes that simply don't exist in the modern world. Tommy's psychological makeup, forged in the concrete jungles of Liberty City and Vice City, is completely unsuited for the ancient world. He needs control, needs to be in charge, needs to understand the systems he's operating in. Ancient Egypt offers him none of these things. The cultural shock would be overwhelming. In Vice City, even the criminals operated within a recognizable cultural framework. The language was familiar, the social norms were understandable, even if you chose to break them. In ancient Egypt, Tommy is culturally illiterate, unable to read the signals that tell him what's safe, what's dangerous, what's acceptable, what's forbidden. Tommy's used to being the predator, not the prey. In Vice City, he was the threat that others had to worry about. In ancient Egypt, he's the vulnerable outsider who doesn't understand the rules, doesn't speak the language, and has no allies or resources to fall back on. The man who built an empire through violence, cunning, and ruthless ambition finds himself powerless in a world where power comes from entirely different sources. Divine authority, religious knowledge, royal bloodlines, priestly connections, none of these are things Tommy can acquire through his usual methods. As night falls on Tommy's first day in ancient Egypt, he would lie on his uncomfortable straw mat, listening to unfamiliar sounds from the Nile, covered in insect bites, nursing sunburn, still hungry despite eating, and probably beginning to understand that Vice City's mean streets were actually a paradise compared to ancient Egypt's unforgiving reality. The man who famously said, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman," would discover that in ancient Egypt, there is no business as he understands it. There's only survival, divine will, and the hope that tomorrow might be slightly less miserable than today. Tommy Vercetti wouldn't last a day in ancient Egypt. Not because he lacks cunning, intelligence, or ruthlessness. Qualities he has in abundance. He wouldn't last because everything that made him successful in Vice City is not just useless, but often counterproductive in the ancient world. The skills that made him a king among criminals would make him just another foreigner struggling to survive in a world he couldn't hope to understand, let alone conquer. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, spare a thought for Tommy Vercetti, lost in time, discovering that all the money, power, and respect in Vice City can't buy you a single day of comfort in ancient Egypt. Sweet dreams, and remember, falls. Sometimes the biggest fish in one pond becomes nothing more than bait in another. But wait, there's so much more to uncover about why Tommy Vercetti would be completely out of his depth in ancient Egypt. Let's dive deeper into the specific challenges that would break even the toughest Vice City crime boss. Tommy's accustomed to a world where information is power, and he always made sure to stay informed. In Vice City, he had contacts everywhere. Corrupt cops feeding him intelligence, rival gang members on his payroll, business associates who kept him updated on market conditions. But in ancient Egypt, information travels at the speed of a running messenger or a boat sailing down the Nile. No newspapers, no radio, no television, no internet. Tommy would be operating completely blind in a world where the wrong information lack of information could get you killed. The medical situation would be a constant nightmare for Tommy. In Vice City, if he got shot, stabbed, or beaten up, he could visit a back alley doctor who'd patch him up with modern techniques and antibiotics. In ancient Egypt, medical practice is a terrifying combination of primitive surgery, magical incantations, and prayer. Got a headache? They'll drill a hole in your skull to let the demons out. Broken bone? They'll set it with sticks and hope for the best. with no painkillers stronger than fermented grain. Think about Tommy's lifestyle in Vice City. Late nights at clubs, cocaine-fueled parties, expensive restaurants, beautiful women. Now imagine him trying to find entertainment in ancient Egypt. The height of nightlife might be a religious festival, where you get to watch ritual sacrifices, and the closest thing to a party is a funeral where mourners wail dramatically, while professionals tear their clothes and throw dust on their heads. Not exactly Tommy's scene. The concept of personal space, which Tommy valued highly in his mansion overlooking the Vice City ocean, simply doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. You're packed into small areas with extended family, animals and strangers. Privacy is a luxury only pharaohs can afford, and even they're surrounded by servants, priests and officials at all times. Tommy can't retreat to his private office to plan his next move or escape to his yacht when things get heated. Tommy's sophisticated money laundering operations in Vice City involved complex financial instruments, shell companies, and offshore accounts. In ancient Egypt, the entire concept of abstract wealth is foreign. Money as Tommy understands it doesn't exist. Trade is conducted through bartering goods, grain for pottery, cattle for jewelry, labor for food. Tommy can't buy his way out of trouble when the currency itself is alien to him. The dietary restrictions alone would drive Tommy insane. In Vice City, he could get any cuisine he wanted at any time of day. Cuban sandwiches, Italian pasta, American steaks, Chinese takeout. In ancient Egypt, if you're not wealthy, your diet consists mainly of bread, onions, fish on good days, and beer. That's it. Meat is reserved for special occasions and the wealthy. Tommy would go from dining at the finest restaurants to fighting over dried fish. Tommy's success in Vice City was built on understanding human psychology and social dynamics. He knew how to read people, when to be charming, when to be threatening, how to exploit weaknesses. But in ancient Egypt, social interactions are governed by complex religious and cultural rules he doesn't understand. What might be a friendly gesture in his world could be a mortal insult in theirs. The technological gap would frustrate Tommy beyond measure. In Vice City, he had the latest cars, weapons, communication devices. He could coordinate complex operations across the city using technology. In ancient Egypt, the most advanced technology is a wheel, and even that's not widely used for transportation. Forget about precision timing, synchronized attacks, or instant communication across distances. Tommy's real estate empire in Vice City was built on understanding property values, zoning laws and market manipulation. But in ancient Egypt, all land essentially belongs to the pharaoh. You can't buy property in the sense Tommy understands it. You might be granted use of land by the pharaoh, or a temple, but true ownership as a concept doesn't exist. The legal system that Tommy learned to navigate and exploit in Vice City is replaced by something far more arbitrary in ancient Egypt. There are no lawyers, no appeals, no constitutional rights. Justice is often decided by trial by ordeal. If you survive having your hand plunged into boiling oil, you're innocent. If you don't, well, case closed. Tommy's famous temper, which he learned to control and use strategically in Vice City, would be his downfall in ancient Egypt. Showing anger towards someone of higher status could result in immediate punishment or death. The rigid hierarchy means Tommy has to swallow his pride and take abuse from people he would have eliminated without a second thought in Vice City. Concepts of individual rights and personal freedom that Tommy took for granted in Vice City simply don't exist in ancient Egypt. You have no right to due process, no right to legal representation, no right to privacy, no right to choose your own religion, no right to free speech. You exist at the pleasure of those above you in the hierarchy, and that hierarchy is divinely ordained. Tommy's business model in Vice City relied on creating demand for illegal goods and services, drugs, protection, illegal gambling. But in ancient Egypt, the state controls most economic activity. There's no underground economy for Tommy to exploit, no illegal markets to dominate. The pharaoh's government has a monopoly on everything that matters. The networking skills that served Tommy so well in Vice City, building relationships with useful people, cultivating informants, creating alliances, are severely hampered in ancient Egypt by language barriers, cultural differences, and social restrictions. Tommy can't just walk into a tavern and start making friends. Foreigners are viewed with suspicion, and social mobility is extremely limited. Tommy's used to being able to disappear when he needs to lay low. In Vice City, he had safe houses, trusted associates who would hide him, boats to take him offshore. In ancient Egypt, there's nowhere to hide. If you're not where you're supposed to be, doing what you're supposed to be doing, people notice immediately. There's no anonymity in small, tight-knit communities. The educational system that produced Tommy's sophisticated understanding of business, psychology, and strategy doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. Literacy is limited to scribes and priests. Most people can't read or write. Tommy's advanced knowledge and quick thinking, which gave him advantages in Vice City, would seem almost supernatural to ancient Egyptians, which could get him accused of witchcraft. Tommy's comfortable with violence as a tool, but ancient Egyptian violence operates under different rules. In Vice City, he could eliminate rivals quietly, create accidents, or start wars between other families. In ancient Egypt, unauthorized violence against anyone of higher status is punished severely, and higher status includes virtually everyone, since Tommy starts at the bottom as a foreigner. The speed of change that Tommy thrived on in Vice City's quick deals, rapid responses to threats, fast-paced operations, is replaced by a society that moves at the pace of the seasons. Everything in ancient Egypt happens slowly. Decisions are made by consensus among priests and nobles. Construction projects take generations. Trade missions can last months. Tommy's sophisticated understanding of modern warfare and tactics is useless in ancient Egypt. No firearms, no explosives, no modern military strategy. Warfare is hand-to-hand combat with bronze weapons, and military organization is based on different principles entirely. Tommy's strategic brilliance means nothing when applied to weapons and tactics he doesn't understand. The gender dynamics that Tommy navigated in Vice Cities, where women could be allies, enemies, or tools, are completely different in ancient Egypt. Women have more rights than in many ancient societies, but the social dynamics are governed by religious and cultural rules Tommy doesn't comprehend. His usual approach to dealing with women would likely get him in serious trouble. Tommy's reputation, which opened doors and inspired fear in Vice City, means nothing in ancient Egypt. Reputation here is based on family lineage, religious devotion, service to the pharaoh, or divine favor. Tommy's criminal achievements are not just meaningless, they're actively harmful to his survival in a society that values completely different qualities. The climate control that Tommy enjoyed in Vice City, supply conditioning, heated buildings, temperature regulation, is replaced by brutal exposure to the elements in ancient Egypt. The desert heat is relentless, the cold nights are harsh, and there's no escape from either. Tommy's comfort and health deteriorate rapidly under conditions that would challenge even those born to them. Tommy's substance abuse habits from Vice City would become immediately problematic in ancient Egypt. There's no cocaine, no modern alcohol, and the few mind-altering substances available are controlled by priests for religious ceremonies. Tommy would have to deal with withdrawal while adapting to an alien culture, a recipe for disaster. The time management skills that allowed Tommy to coordinate complex criminal operations in Vice City are useless when there are no clocks, no scheduled meetings, no precise timing. Everything in ancient Egypt operates on natural rhythms: sunrise, sunset, seasons, floods. Tommy's need for precision and control is constantly frustrated. Tommy's experience with corruption in Vice City involved bribing officials, police, judges, people who operated within recognizable systems. But in ancient Egypt, corruption operates differently. Since the pharaoh is divine, corruption isn't just illegal, it's blasphemous. And the people you'd need to corrupt are often more interested in maintaining religious purity than acquiring wealth. The weapons expertise that kept Tommy alive in Vice City is useless in ancient Egypt. He knows guns, modern explosives, advanced martial arts. But in ancient Egypt, weapons are bronze swords, spears, bows and arrows. Tommy would have to relearn combat from scratch, competing against people who've trained with these weapons their entire lives. Tommy's crisis management skills, developed through surviving betrayals and gang wars in Vice City, are tested by crises he's never imagined. Natural disasters like Nile floods, locust swarms, or droughts, religious upheavals when priests declare divine displeasure, political crises when the pharaoh dies and succession is disputed. These are systemic problems that can't be solved with bullets or bribes. The insurance and risk management concepts that protected Tommy's assets in Vice City don't exist in ancient Egypt. There's no insurance against crop failure, theft, injury, or death. Your only protection is divine favor, and the goodwill of those more powerful than you. Tommy's sophisticated risk mitigation strategies are replaced by prayer and hope. Tommy's used to controlling information flow, knows what, when they know it, how they learn it. In ancient Egypt, information control is in the hands of priests and scribes who can read and write. Tommy is information poor in a society where knowledge is power, and he has no access to either the sources or the means of information. The marketing and persuasion skills that helped Tommy build his empire in Vice City are hampered by his lack of understanding of ancient Egyptian psychology. He doesn't know what motivates people, what they fear, what they desire, what cultural references will resonate with them. His silver tongue is useless when he's speaking the wrong language. Tommy's experience with law enforcement in Vice City prepared him to deal with cops, feds, and private security. But ancient Egyptian law enforcement is different. Temple guards, royal guard, local militias, they all operate under different authorities with different motivations. Tommy's strategies for dealing with one type of authority figure don't work with others. The transportation logistics that Tommy mastered in Vice City, moving people and goods quickly and secretly, are impossible in ancient Egypt. No cars, trains, planes, or modern boats. Everything moves by foot, donkey, or simple sailing vessel. A journey that would take hours in Vice City takes days or weeks in ancient Egypt. Tommy's comfortable with urban environments, understanding city layouts, traffic patterns, escape routes. Ancient Egypt is largely rural and agricultural. The few cities that exist are organized completely differently from modern cities. Tommy's urban survival skills don't translate to rural ancient environments. The customer service and relationship management that kept Tommy's businesses running in Vice City require a different approach in ancient Egypt. You can't just fire unsatisfactory workers or find replacements easily. Labor is often tied to family relationships, religious obligations, or feudal contracts that Tommy doesn't understand. Tommy's investment strategies in Vice City involve diversified portfolios, real estate speculation, and market manipulation. Ancient Egypt doesn't have financial markets in any recognizable form. Wealth is stored in tangible goods, grain, cattle, gold, land use rights. There's no concept of abstract financial instruments. The competitive intelligence gathering that kept Tommy ahead of rival families in Vice City is impossible in ancient Egypt, where he lacks the cultural knowledge to interpret what he observes. He might witness a religious ceremony and have no idea that it signals a shift in political power or economic policy. Tommy's succession planning in Vice City involved grooming lieutenants, creating power structures, and ensuring continuity of operations. In ancient Egypt, power succession is based on divine bloodlines and religious approval. Tommy can't create a lasting organization because he can't navigate the religious and political requirements for legitimacy. The quality control systems that ensured Tommy's operations ran smoothly in Vice City don't exist in ancient Egypt. No standardized measurements, no quality assurance processes, no regulatory oversight. Everything is done by tradition, rule of thumb, and divine blessing. Tommy's ability to compartmentalize information in Vice City, keeping different parts of his organization from knowing too much about each other, is impossible in small ancient Egyptian communities, where everyone knows everyone's business. There's no operational security when you live in close quarters with extended family and neighbors. The leisure activities that kept Tommy sane in Vice City, golf, swimming, boating, nightclubs, simply don't exist in ancient Egypt. Recreation is limited to religious festivals, storytelling, and simple games. Tommy's need for stimulation and entertainment goes largely unmet. Tommy's sophisticated understanding of psychology and human motivation breaks down when applied to people whose worldview is fundamentally different. Ancient Egyptians view the world through a religious lens that makes their behavior unpredictable to someone from Tommy's secular, materialistic background. The maintenance of equipment and property that Tommy took for granted in Vice City becomes a major challenge in ancient Egypt. No specialist to call, no replacement parts, no standardized tools. When something breaks, you either fix it yourself with whatever materials you can find, or you do without. Tommy's experience with different types of personalities and criminal mindsets in Vice City doesn't prepare him for the different personality types shaped by ancient Egyptian culture. The motivations, fears, and desires that drove people in Vice City are different from those that drive people in ancient Egypt. The financial record keeping that was essential to Tommy's operations in Vice City is impossible in ancient Egypt, where most people can't read or write. All transactions are remembered, all debts are personal, all agreements are verbal. Tommy's sophisticated accounting practices are useless. Tommy's ability to read social situations and anticipate people's actions, crucial to his survival in Vice City, is severely impaired in ancient Egypt. where social cues are based on religious and cultural knowledge he lacks. He can't predict how people will react because he doesn't understand the cultural logic behind their behavior. The emergency protocols that kept Tommy alive through numerous attempts on his life in Vice City's safe houses, escape routes, emergency communication can't be established in ancient Egypt, where he lacks the resources, knowledge and cultural connections necessary to create such systems. Tommy's understanding of market economics, which allowed him to manipulate prices and create artificial scarcity in Vice City, is useless in ancient Egypt's redistributive economy where the state controls most production and distribution of goods. The territory management that was central to Tommy's power in Vice City's controlling specific neighborhoods, establishing boundaries, defending turf doesn't apply in ancient Egypt where territorial control is based on royal grants, religious authority, and family lineage rather than force. Tommy's experience with different cultural groups in Vice City's Cubans, Haitians, Italians gives him some multicultural awareness, but nothing prepares him for a culture as fundamentally different as ancient Egypt. The cultural gap is simply too vast for his previous experience to be relevant. The delegation skills that allowed Tommy to manage a large criminal organization in Vice City require him to find trustworthy people with relevant skills. In ancient Egypt, he doesn't know who to trust, doesn't understand what skills are valuable, and can't evaluate people's competence in areas he doesn't understand himself. Tommy's strategic patience in Vice City's waiting for the right moment to strike, playing long games against rivals, is tested by the much longer timescales of ancient Egypt, where important events unfold over decades rather than months, and where his own survival is in immediate, constant jeopardy. The technological infrastructure that enabled Tommy's communication and coordination in Vice City simply doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. No phones, no radios, no computers, no internet. Communication is face-to-face, or by written message carried by human messenger, making real-time coordination of complex operations impossible. Tommy's cash flow management, which kept his various enterprises running in Vice City, is irrelevant in ancient Egypt's largely cashless economy. Without steady income streams and with limited ability to generate wealth through familiar means, Tommy faces constant financial insecurity. The brand recognition that made Tommy's name feared and respected throughout Vice City means nothing in ancient Egypt, where he's just another nameless foreigner. Building a reputation from scratch in an alien culture, where the values and behaviors that create respect are completely different, would take years, if he survives that long. Tommy's legal advisors in Vice City helped him navigate complex laws and regulations. In ancient Egypt, there are no lawyers in the modern sense. Legal decisions are made by religious authorities based on religious law and pharaonic decree. Tommy has no advisors who understand the system he's trapped in. The surveillance and counter-surveillance techniques that kept Tommy ahead of his enemies in Vice City are useless in ancient Egypt, where there's no technology for remote surveillance, and where being watched is a constant accepted part of community life. Tommy's inventory management systems in Vice City ensured his various businesses were well stocked and efficient. In ancient Egypt, inventory is kept in your head, goods are stored in primitive conditions subject to spoilage and theft, and supply chains depend on seasonal availability and the whims of nature. The human resources management that allowed Tommy to recruit, train and retain quality personnel in Vice City is impossible in ancient Egypt, where employment relationships are often based on family connections, religious obligations, or feudal bonds that can't be bought or negotiated. Tommy's crisis communication strategies in Vice City involved controlling narratives, managing media relationships, and shaping public opinion. In ancient Egypt, there is no media, public opinion is shaped by religious authorities, and narrative control belongs to those who can write moles, which excludes Tommy. The operational security that protected Tommy's activities from law enforcement in Vice City requires understanding how law enforcement operates. Ancient Egyptian law enforcement is administered by religious and royal authorities operating under divine mandate, a completely different system requiring different countermeasures. Tommy's vendor management and supply chain relationships in Vice City depended on formal contracts, reliable transportation, and predictable delivery schedules. Ancient Egypt offers none of these. Trade relationships are personal, transportation is slow and unreliable, and there are no contracts as Tommy understands them. The performance metrics that allowed Tommy to measure success in Vice City, profit margins, territory controlled, rivals eliminated, don't apply in ancient Egypt, where success is measured by divine favor, religious purity, and service to Pharaoh. Tommy's definitions of success are irrelevant. Tommy's talent for identifying opportunities in Vice City Pine, undervalued properties, finding gaps in the market, exploiting regulatory loopholes, is useless in ancient Egypt, where he doesn't understand the economy, can't identify valuable resources, and doesn't know what constitutes an opportunity in this society. The dispute resolution mechanisms that kept Tommy's organization running smoothly in Vice City negotiation, mediation, force operate under different rules in ancient Egypt, where disputes are often resolved through religious judgment, divine ordeal, or royal decree. Tommy's understanding of seasonal business patterns in Vice City Pine tourist seasons, holiday spending, weather-related fluctuations, is replaced by the need to understand ancient Egypt's agricultural cycles, flood patterns, and religious calendar, knowledge that takes years to develop. The asset protection strategies that kept Tommy's wealth safe in Vice City involve offshore accounts, hidden assets, and legal structures that don't exist in ancient Egypt. Wealth protection depends on physical security, political favor, and religious blessing, all of which Tommy lacks. Tommy's ability to inspire loyalty in Vice City through a combination of fear, respect, and rewards doesn't work in ancient Egypt, where loyalty is inspired by different means: family honor, religious duty, divine favor, none of which Tommy can provide. The contingency planning that prepared Tommy for various scenarios in Vice City becomes nearly impossible in ancient Egypt, where he lacks basic information about the environment, potential threats, available resources, and cultural norms necessary for effective planning. As we reach the end of our exploration of Tommy Vercetti's hypothetical ordeal in ancient Egypt, one thing becomes crystal clear: every single advantage that made Tommy successful in Vice City becomes a liability in ancient Egypt. His modern mindset, technological dependence, cultural assumptions, and survival strategies are not just inadequate, they're actively dangerous in a world that operates on completely different principles. Tommy Vercetti represents the pinnacle of modern criminal sophistication, strategic thinking, technological leverage, financial manipulation, psychological warfare. But even the most sophisticated modern criminal is helpless when stripped of everything that makes modernity possible and dropped into an ancient world that might as well be another planet. The ancient Egyptians weren't inherently superior to Tommy, they were simply adapted to their environment in ways that took generations to develop. Their knowledge was hard-won through thousands of years of trial and error, success and failure, survival and death. Tommy, for all his intelligence and ruthlessness, simply doesn't have the cultural software necessary to operate their system. So as you drift into sleep tonight, consider this sobering thought: all of human civilization is built on accumulated knowledge, shared culture, and technological infrastructure. Remove any of these foundations, and even the most capable individuals become helpless children in a world they cannot comprehend. Tommy Vercetti, crime boss of Vice City, master of his domain, would last approximately one day in ancient Egypt, not because he's weak, but because strength without context is meaningless, intelligence without cultural knowledge is blindness, and power without social connections is just fantasy. Sweet dreams, and remember, the apex predator of one ecosystem becomes prey in another, and sometimes the greatest treasure isn't knowing how to take what you want, but knowing how to survive in a world that was never meant for you. Rest well, thinking of poor Tommy, somewhere along the Nile, learning that all his Miami mansions and Vice City victories can't buy him even a decent night's sleep under the ancient Egyptian stars. But our journey into Tommy's ancient Egyptian nightmare isn't quite over, because as that first day bleeds into night, Tommy would begin to understand that survival in ancient Egypt isn't just about adapting to the heat, the food, or even the social hierarchy. It's about accepting that everything he thought he knew about human nature, power, and survival was formed in a world that wouldn't exist for another 3,000 years. Let's delve deeper into the psychological torture that would await Tommy as darkness falls over the Nile. Tommy's used to the neon glow of Vice City at night, a city that never sleeps, where the action often gets more intense after sunset. But ancient Egyptian nights bring a different kind of darkness, a profound blackness broken only by oil lamps that cut dancing shadows and create more mystery than illumination. There's no street lighting, no 24-hour establishments, no late-night entertainment district. When the sun goes down, the world essentially shuts off. The sounds of night in ancient Egypt would be alien and disturbing to Tommy. In Vice City, night sounds meant traffic, music from clubs, the occasional gunshot or police siren, urban sounds he could interpret and navigate. But lying on his straw mat, Tommy would hear the hippos grunting in the Nile, the cry of night birds he's never heard before, the rustling of insects and small animals in the walls of his mud brick shelter. Every sound could be a threat he doesn't understand. Sleep itself becomes a challenge for a man accustomed to climate-controlled bedrooms and memory foam mattresses. The temperature drops significantly in the desert at night, and without proper blankets, luxury Tommy can't afford as a penniless foreigner. He'd shiver on his straw bedding, covered only by a rough piece of linen that offers little warmth. The cold is as shocking as the day's heat, and Tommy's body, already stressed from the day's ordeals, can't regulate its temperature properly. Tommy's insomnia in this new world wouldn't just be from physical discomfort. His mind would race with the impossibility of his situation. In Vice City, when he faced problems, he could visualize solutions, who to call, what resources to deploy, how to outmaneuver enemies. But in ancient Egypt, lying in the dark, he can't even begin to formulate a plan, because he doesn't understand the basic rules of the game he's now forced to play. The concept of personal security that Tommy valued so highly in Vice City is completely absent here. No bodyguards, no early warning systems, no safe houses to retreat to. Tommy would lie awake, knowing that anyone could walk into his shelter. Thieves, wild animals, officials with grievances, or simply people who don't like foreigners. There's no 911 to call, no security company to hire, no weapons stash to rely on. He's completely vulnerable, in a way he's never experienced. As the night wears on, Tommy would begin to grasp the true scope of his predicament. This isn't like being stranded in a foreign country, where you don't speak the language. This is being stranded in a foreign time, where the very concepts that govern human interaction are alien to him. The social contract he understood in Vice City, based on money, power, and fear, simply doesn't exist here. The rules of engagement are written in hieroglyphs he can't read, enforced by gods he doesn't believe in, administered by people who see him as less than human. Tommy's relationship with time itself would become twisted in ancient Egypt. In Vice City, he lived by schedules, deadlines, precise timing. But in ancient Egypt, time moves differently. Seasons matter more than hours. Religious festivals dictate activity more than business meetings. The phases of the moon determine when certain activities can take place. Tommy would find himself trapped in a temporal prison, where his modern urgency and need for quick results would be constantly frustrated by a society that thinks in terms of dynasties and generations. The isolation would be perhaps the cruelest torture of all. Tommy was never truly alone in Vice City. He had his organization, his contacts, his network of relationships. Even his enemies were familiar, predictable in their motivations and methods. But in ancient Egypt, he's surrounded by people yet completely alone. No one speaks his language. No one shares his cultural references. No one understands his jokes or his fears, or his dreams. He's a ghost in a living world, visible but unable to truly connect. Tommy's famous temper, which in Vice City could be channeled into productive violence or intimidation, would become his greatest enemy in ancient Egypt. Every slight, every misunderstanding, every moment of disrespect would build inside him with no acceptable outlet. In Vice City, if someone disrespected him, he could retaliate. In ancient Egypt, the same response could mean death, enslavement, or worse. Tommy would have to swallow his pride, bite his tongue, and accept humiliation from people he could have destroyed in his own time and place. The medical situation would haunt Tommy constantly. In Vice City, if he got hurt, he knew where to go and what to expect. In ancient Egypt, the slightest injury could become fatal. A cut that gets infected, a broken bone that doesn't heal properly, a fever that won't break, many of these could kill him, and the medicine available would seem more like torture than treatment. Tommy would live in constant fear of his own body betraying him. The psychological games that Tommy was so adept at playing in Vice City, manipulation, intimidation, reward and punishment, would be useless in a society where he doesn't understand the basic psychology of the people. What motivates a person who believes their pharaoh is literally a god? How do you threaten someone who believes death is just a transition to another life? How do you bribe someone whose greatest fear is divine punishment? Tommy's toolkit for dealing with people would be completely empty. As days turn into weeks, Tommy would begin to experience a form of cultural vertigo, a complete loss of reference points that would shake his sense of self. In Vice City, he knew who he was, what he represented, how he fit into the world. In ancient Egypt, he'd be forced to confront the possibility that everything he thought made him special, made him powerful, made him Tommy Vercetti, was actually just a product of his time and place. Strip away the technology, the money, the cultural context, and what's left? Just a man, lost and afraid, in a world that doesn't have room for him. The religious aspect would be particularly challenging for Tommy's rational modern mind. In Vice City, he could dismiss religion as something for other people, something to exploit or ignore as convenient. But in ancient Egypt, the gods are everywhere, in every decision, every conversation, every moment of daily life. Tommy would be forced to either accept their existence, which would shatter his worldview, or constantly live as a heretic in a society where heresy is punishable by death. The agricultural calendar that governs ancient Egyptian life would seem arbitrary and frustrating to Tommy. In Vice City, he could work deals any time of day or night, any season of the year. But in ancient Egypt, certain activities can only happen at certain times: planting season, harvest season, flood season. Tommy would find himself trapped in a rhythm not of his choosing, unable to force events to happen when he wants them to happen. The concept of honor in ancient Egypt would be foreign to Tommy. In Vice City, honor was something you could fake, buy, or take by force. But in ancient Egypt, honor is tied to family lineage, religious purity, service to Pharaoh, things Tommy can't acquire through any means available to him. He'd be forced to live without the one thing that, in ancient Egyptian society, makes a man worth respecting: Tommy's famous sexual appetites, which he could easily satisfy in Vice City's permissive environment, would become another source of frustration in ancient Egypt. The strict social rules governing relationships between men and women, especially involving foreigners, would severely limit his options. What was freely available in Vice City would be forbidden, dangerous, or simply impossible to arrange in ancient Egypt. The legal system's arbitrariness would drive Tommy to distraction. In Vice City, even when the law was corrupt, it was at least predictable. You knew who to bribe, what crimes carried what penalties, how to work within or around the system. But ancient Egyptian justice often seems random to modern eyes. Trial by ordeal, divine judgment, punishment based on social status rather than actual guilt. Tommy would never feel safe, because he could never predict what might trigger legal consequences. As summer heat gives way to the cooler months, Tommy would discover that ancient Egypt isn't just hot, it can be cold too. The desert nights can be surprisingly chilly, and without modern heating, clothing, or shelter, Tommy would suffer through months of discomfort that would seem endless. The seasons in ancient Egypt would become a calendar of different forms of misery. The sheer physical exhaustion of ancient Egyptian life would wear Tommy down. In Vice City, even his most strenuous activities, running from cops, fighting rivals, managing his empire, were interspersed with periods of luxury and comfort. But in ancient Egypt, the work never stops. Dawn to dusk physical labor, with no modern conveniences to ease the burden. Tommy's soft modern body would rebel against this ancient rhythm of endless toil. Tommy's fear of becoming irrelevant would be realized in the most complete way possible. In Vice City, he mattered. People knew his name, feared his power, respected his achievements. In ancient Egypt, he's nobody, just another foreign laborer, whose life or death means nothing to the grand scheme of things. The anonymity would eat at him more than any physical hardship. The complete lack of privacy would constantly grate on Tommy. In Vice City, he could retreat to his mansion, his office, his yacht, on spaces that were his alone. In ancient Egypt, privacy is a luxury even pharaohs barely enjoy. Tommy would live in constant proximity to others, never able to escape to think, to plan, to simply be alone with his thoughts. The language barrier would remain a constant source of frustration. Even if Tommy began to pick up some ancient Egyptian, he'd never achieve the fluency necessary for complex negotiations, subtle manipulation, or even just fitting in. He'd always be the outsider, the one who doesn't quite understand what's being said, who misses the nuances that could mean the difference between life and death. Tommy's relationship with violence would undergo a complete transformation. In Vice City, violence was a tool he wielded with precision and purpose. In ancient Egypt, violence would be something that happens to him, something he has no control over. He'd be subject to beatings from overseers, punishments from officials, attacks from criminals or rivals, and his ability to fight back would be severely limited by his position in society. The complete absence of his Vice City lifestyle, The cars, the clothes, the cocaine, the respect would create a form of withdrawal that goes beyond simple drug addiction. Tommy would be withdrawing from modernity itself, from a whole way of being in the world that simply doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. As months pass, Tommy would begin to lose his sense of self entirely. The Tommy Vercetti, who conquered Vice City, was a product of 20th century America, its values, its opportunities, its technologies, its culture. Stripped of that context, what remains? In ancient Egypt, Tommy would be forced to discover who he really is beneath the surface, and the answer might terrify him. The realization that he might never return to his own time would eventually set in. This isn't a temporary setback, a problem to be solved, an enemy to be defeated. This is his life now, forever. Tommy would have to face the possibility that he'll grow old and die in ancient Egypt, unknown, unremembered, just another foreigner who adapted or perished. But perhaps the cruelest irony of all is that Tommy's intelligence, ruthlessness, and natural leadership abilities, the very qualities that made him successful in Vice City, would make his suffering in ancient Egypt even more acute. A dull, complacent person might adapt more easily, accepting their fate without question. But Tommy's sharp mind would constantly see opportunities he can't take, solutions he can't implement, power he can't grasp. His very competence would become a source of torment. The dreams would be the worst part. Every night, Tommy would dream of Vice City, the smell of the ocean, the neon lights, the purr of a well-tuned engine, the respect in people's eyes when they saw him coming. And every morning, he'd wake up to find himself still in ancient Egypt, still nobody, still trapped in a world that was never meant for him. In the end, Tommy Vercetti wouldn't just fail to last a day in ancient Egypt. The ancient Egypt would last forever in him, changing him in ways he could never have imagined. The man who went to sleep in Vice City and woke up in ancient Egypt would eventually cease to exist entirely, replaced by who? Someone bent but not broken. Someone who found a new way to be powerful in an impossible situation, or simply someone who learned too late that sometimes the strongest person in one world can be the weakest in another. Sweet dreams, and remember, sometimes the most interesting question isn't whether someone would survive in the past, but whether the past would survive in them. Rest well, thinking of Tommy Vercetti, lost in time, discovering that the hardest prison to escape isn't one made of stone and iron, but one made of years and centuries, and the relentless tick of cosmic time itself. But there's more to Tommy's ordeal than we've yet explored, because as seasons change in ancient Egypt, as the Nile floods and recedes, as religious festivals mark the passage of time, Tommy would face challenges that go beyond mere survival. He would face the fundamental question of identity itself. In Vice City, Tommy was defined by his possessions, his power, his reputation. But what happens when all of that is stripped away? What happens when a man who defined himself by what he owned finds himself owning nothing? What happens when someone whose identity was built on fear and respect finds himself at the bottom of a social hierarchy that considers him barely human? Tommy's relationship with work would undergo a complete transformation. In Vice City, work was about building an empire, accumulating power, achieving dominance. In ancient Egypt, work is pure survival: bowl hauling water, digging irrigation channels, harvesting grain under the merciless sun. There's no sense of achievement, no building towards something greater, just the endless, grinding necessity of staying alive one more day. The concept of leisure, which Tommy took for granted in Vice City, would become a distant memory. Every moment in ancient Egypt must be productive, or else death creeps closer. There's no time for recreation, no energy for entertainment, no resources for pleasure. Life becomes a narrow focus on the basic necessities of existence. Tommy's famous strategic mind, which served him so well in Vice City's criminal underworld, would find no outlet in ancient Egypt. All his intelligence, all his cunning, all his ability to see 3 moves ahead, none of it matters when the game itself is incomprehensible. He'd be like a chess grandmaster, forced to play a game whose rules change with every move, and whose pieces have powers he doesn't understand. The seasonal nature of ancient Egyptian life would torture Tommy's modern sensibilities. In Vice City, he could make deals any time of day or night, any season of the year. Business never slept. But in ancient Egypt, life follows the Nile's flood cycle, the agricultural calendar, the religious observances. Want to trade, wait for the flood to subside, need to travel, wait for the festival season to end. Everything operates on rhythms set by forces beyond human control. Tommy's understanding of cause and effect, so crucial to his success in Vice City, would be constantly challenged in ancient Egypt. In his modern world, effects followed causes in logical, predictable ways. Shoot someone, they die. Bribe an official, they cooperate. But in ancient Egypt, causation is often mystical, religious, incomprehensible. Why did the harvest fail? The gods are angry. Why did the pharaoh fall ill? Someone violated a taboo. Why did the Nile flood early? Divine intervention. Tommy's rational worldview would be under constant assault. The economic concepts that made Tommy wealthy in Vice City's profit margins, investment returns, market manipulation, have no meaning in ancient Egypt's subsistence economy. Most people live paycheck to paycheck in the most literal sense, with payment being measured in bread and beer rather than money. There's no accumulation, no growth, no investment for the future, just the endless cycle of work, eat, sleep, survive. Tommy's social skills, which allowed him to navigate Vice City's complex criminal hierarchies, would be utterly useless in ancient Egypt. His ability to read people, to manipulate them, to inspire loyalty or fear, all of this depends on understanding psychology, motivation, cultural cues. In ancient Egypt, he'd be culturally blind, unable to distinguish between a powerful priest and a lowly scribe, unable to recognize insults or offerings, unable to navigate the invisible networks that really control Egyptian society. The medical reality of ancient Egypt would create a constant undercurrent of fear in Tommy's life. Every cut could become infected, every fever could be fatal, every cough could be the beginning of a lung disease that will kill him slowly and painfully. In Vice City, Tommy faced violent death quick, clean, with bullets or knives. In ancient Egypt, he'd face disease, infection, parasites, slow, messy, agonizing ways to die. Tommy's famous temper, which in Vice City could be channeled into productive violence, would become a constant liability in ancient Egypt. Every insult would have to be swallowed, every humiliation would have to be endured, every moment of disrespect would have to be accepted with a smile. Tommy would have to learn emotional control at a level that would challenge even a Buddhist monk. The complete lack of privacy in ancient Egyptian society would be especially torture for someone like Tommy, who valued the ability to retreat, to think, to plan in solitude. In ancient Egypt, you're surrounded by family, neighbors, animals, all crammed into small spaces. Your business is everyone's business. Your problems are community problems. Your failures are public failures. Tommy's sophisticated understanding of human psychology, which allowed him to predict and manipulate behavior in Vice City, would be worse than useless in ancient Egypt. It would be dangerous. Modern psychological insights applied to people with completely different worldviews could lead to disastrous misunderstandings. Tommy might think he's reading someone correctly, and end up insulting them in ways he doesn't even understand. The technological limitations would frustrate Tommy at every turn. No precision instruments, no standardized measurements, no quality control. Everything is handmade, approximate, good enough. Tommy's perfectionist tendencies, his desire for control and precision, would be constantly frustrated by the primitive tools and methods of ancient Egypt. Tommy's business acumen, which made him wealthy in Vice City, would be completely irrelevant in ancient Egypt's controlled economy. Market economics don't exist. Supply and demand are matters of life and death, not profit and loss. The pharaoh and the temples control everything that matters. There's no room for entrepreneurs, no opportunity for innovation, no reward for efficiency. The educational gap between Tommy and ancient Egyptians would be a source of both advantage and danger. Tommy's literacy, his mathematical knowledge, his understanding of complex concepts, all of this would seem magical to most ancient Egyptians, but in a society where knowledge is power carefully controlled by priests and scribes, being too smart could get you branded as a sorcerer or heretic. Tommy's relationship with time would undergo a radical transformation. In Vice City, time was money, every minute had value, every hour was optimized, but in ancient Egypt, time moves differently. Seasons matter more than hours. Generations matter more than years. Tommy would have to learn to think in cosmic time, not human time. The complete absence of his support network would create a form of psychological isolation that goes beyond mere loneliness. In Vice City, Tommy had lawyers, accountants, enforcers, informants, these people whose job it was to extend his will, to solve his problems, to protect his interests. In ancient Egypt, he has no one. Every problem is his problem. Every threat is his threat. Every decision is his decision, but with none of the information or resources necessary to make good decisions. Tommy's famous charm, which opened doors and smoothed negotiations in Vice City, would fail him completely in ancient Egypt. Charm is cultural. What passes for charisma in 1980s Miami comes across as crude, offensive, or threatening in ancient Egypt. Tommy would have to learn entirely new ways of being likable, and he might discover that the qualities that made him attractive in his time make him repulsive in theirs. The religious obligations of ancient Egyptian life would be especially burdensome for someone like Tommy, who views religion as a convenience or tool rather than a truth. But in ancient Egypt, religious observance isn't optional. You participate in the festivals, you make the offerings, you respect the taboos. To do otherwise isn't just antisocial, it's dangerous. Tommy's understanding of justice, shaped by modern legal systems and criminal codes, would be constantly violated in ancient Egypt. Justice here is often arbitrary, personal, divine. The same crime might be punished with death or ignored entirely, depending on who commits it, who witnesses it, what the priests say, what the pharaoh decides. There's no consistency, no precedent, no appeal. The physical demands of ancient Egyptian life would slowly break down Tommy's modern body. Years of labor under the sun, poor nutrition, primitive medical care, constant exposure to disease, all of this would age him rapidly. The man who prided himself on his physical appearance in Vice City would become weathered, scarred, bent by work and suffering. Tommy's sophisticated palate, developed through years of fine dining in Vice City, would be tortured by the monotonous, often disgusting food of ancient Egypt. Bread with sand, beer that tastes like liquid cardboard, onions and fish when available, meat only on special occasions, no spices, no variety, no flavor, just fuel for the body, nothing more. The noise level of ancient Egyptian life would grate on Tommy's nerves. In Vice City, he could control his environment, close doors, turn off music, escape to quiet spaces. In ancient Egypt, life is lived in public. Animals braying, children crying, people arguing, tools clanging. The constant noise would make it impossible for Tommy to think, to plan, to find any peace. Tommy's relationship with violence would become completely inverted. In Vice City, he dispensed violence to others. In ancient Egypt, violence would be dispensed to him by overseers, by officials, by criminals, by life itself. He'd learn what it feels like to be on the receiving end of arbitrary, senseless brutality. The seasonal diseases that plague ancient Egypt would create cycles of suffering for Tommy. Malaria during flood season, dysentery from bad water, parasites from contaminated food. Each season would bring its own medical horrors, and Tommy would have no immunity, no resistance, no protection from any of them. Tommy's famous vanity, his attention to appearance and style, would be crushed in ancient Egypt. No hair products, no clean clothes, no grooming tools, just the same linen tunic, getting dirtier and more ragged each day. The man who once commanded respect through his appearance would become just another dirty, anonymous laborer. The complete lack of consumer goods would create a form of material deprivation that goes beyond mere poverty. In Vice City, if Tommy wanted something, he could buy it, steal it, or have someone else get it for him. In ancient Egypt, if something doesn't exist, it simply doesn't exist. No amount of money, power, or violence can conjure modern amenities from the ancient world. Tommy's famous impatience, which drove him to quick decisions and rapid action in Vice City, would be constantly frustrated in ancient Egypt. Everything takes time. Travel takes weeks, messages take days, decisions take months, construction takes years. Tommy would have to learn patience at a level that goes against every instinct he's developed. The cultural references that made Tommy who he is, movies, music, books, shared experiences with his generation, would be meaningless in ancient Egypt. No one would understand his jokes, his metaphors, his way of seeing the world. He'd be culturally isolated, in a way that's almost impossible to imagine. Tommy's strategic thinking, which allowed him to outmaneuver rivals in Vice City, would find no application in ancient Egypt. Military strategy is different, political strategy is different, economic strategy doesn't exist. All of Tommy's mental tools for gaining advantage would be useless in a world that operates on entirely different principles. The complete absence of modern entertainment would create a form of mental starvation for Tommy. No TV, no radio, No books, no movies, no video games, just work, eat, sleep, repeat. The stimulation-rich environment of Vice City would be replaced by a grinding monotony that would slowly erode Tommy's sanity. Tommy's relationship with money would undergo a fundamental transformation. In Vice City, money was power, freedom, possibility. In ancient Egypt, wealth is measured in grain, cattle, land, but more importantly, wealth in ancient Egypt comes with obligations to family, to community, to pharaoh, to gods. You can't just accumulate and hoard like you can in modern times. The social expectations placed on Tommy as a foreigner in ancient Egypt would be constantly shifting and often contradictory. Too assimilated, and you're trying to rise above your station. Not assimilated enough, and you're disrespecting the culture. Too successful, and you're threatening the natural order. Too unsuccessful, and you're a burden on society. Tommy's famous loyalty to his crew in Vice City would find no outlet in ancient Egypt. The bonds that tied his organization together, shared experiences, mutual benefit, common enemies, don't exist in a world where everyone starts as a stranger, and loyalty is earned through decades of family relationships and religious observance. The complete unpredictability of ancient Egyptian life would torture Tommy's need for control. Floods, droughts, plagues, wars, religious upheavals, any of these could destroy everything you've built, kill everyone you know, change the entire structure of society overnight. There's no insurance, no backup plan, no way to hedge against catastrophic risk. Tommy's understanding of cause and effect, so crucial to his criminal success, would be constantly challenged by ancient Egyptian beliefs about divine intervention, magical causation, and religious explanation for natural phenomena. Rational thinking would be not just useless, but dangerous in a world where irrationality is the accepted explanation for everything. The physical stamina required for ancient Egyptian life would break down Tommy's modern body. No gym workouts, no protein supplements, no recovery time, just constant physical labor, inadequate nutrition, and the relentless demands of subsistence living. Tommy would discover muscles he didn't know he had, and then watch them waste away from malnutrition and overwork. Tommy's famous intelligence, his quick wit and sharp thinking, would find no reward in ancient Egypt. Intelligence without context is just cleverness, and cleverness without cultural knowledge is often just stupidity in disguise. Tommy would make mistake after mistake, thinking he's being smart when he's actually being foolish. The complete lack of personal autonomy in ancient Egyptian society would be especially galling for someone like Tommy, who built his entire identity around independence and self-determination. In ancient Egypt, your life belongs to Pharaoh, to the gods, to your family, to your community. You exist to serve others, not yourself. Tommy's famous cunning, which allowed him to outthink rivals and law enforcement in Vice City, would be blunted by his ignorance of ancient Egyptian society. You can't outthink a system you don't understand. You can't manipulate people whose motivations are alien to you. You can't plan around variables you're not even aware of. The seasonal nature of ancient Egyptian warfare would add another layer of unpredictability to Tommy's life. Wars start and stop, based on flooding, harvests, religious festivals. Armies of farmers turn back into farmers when planting season arrives. Tommy's understanding of conflict as a continuous state would be useless in a world where war itself follows agricultural rhythms. Tommy's relationship with luxury, which in Vice City meant the finest cars, clothes, and cuisine, would be completely redefined in ancient Egypt. Luxury might mean a second linen tunic, a meal with meat, a night without fleas. The gap between luxury and necessity would shrink to almost nothing. The complete absence of intellectual stimulation would gradually dull Tommy's sharp mind. No books to read, no problems to solve, no challenges to overcome beyond simple survival. The mental atrophy would be as devastating as the physical deterioration. Tommy's famous ruthlessness, which served him well in Vice City's dog-eat-dog world, would have to be completely suppressed in ancient Egypt. Ruthlessness without power is just cruelty, and cruelty without status is just an invitation for punishment. Tommy would have to learn to be meek, to be humble, to be invisible. The religious calendar that governs ancient Egyptian life would impose a rhythm on Tommy's existence that he could never control. Work stops for festivals, travel halts for religious observances, projects are delayed for divine consultations. Tommy would live by a schedule written by gods he doesn't believe in, for purposes he doesn't understand. Tommy's famous adaptability, which allowed him to survive betrayals and setbacks in Vice City, would be tested to its absolute limits in ancient Egypt. But adaptation requires understanding, and understanding requires time, and time might be the one thing Tommy doesn't have. The complete isolation from his own culture would create a form of psychological displacement that goes beyond culture shock. Tommy wouldn't just miss home, he'd miss the entire framework that made home comprehensible. He'd be a fish out of water, doesn't begin to describe it. He'd be a creature from another planet, trying to survive in an alien ecosystem, with no guidebook and no translator. Tommy's famous temper, which could clear a room with a look in Vice City, would make him everyone's favorite target in ancient Egypt. Bullies would pick on him, knowing he can't fight back. Officials would harass him, knowing he can't complain. Criminals would rob him, knowing he can't get justice. The economic realities of ancient Egypt would force Tommy to confront the difference between wealth and power. In Vice City, they went hand in hand. In ancient Egypt, you can be wealthy in grain, but powerless in politics. You can have land but no authority. You can accumulate goods, but lack the social status to enjoy them. Tommy's famous organizational skills, which built a criminal empire in Vice City, would find no outlet in a society where organizations are based on family, religion, or royal appointment rather than competence and ambition. You can't promote yourself in ancient Egypt, you are what you're born to be. The technology gap would create constant frustration and inefficiency. Tasks that took minutes in Vice City take hours in ancient Egypt. Communication that was instant now takes days. Transportation that was simple now becomes epic. Journeys fraught with danger. Tommy's understanding of human nature, developed through years of criminal psychology, would fail him completely when applied to people whose nature was shaped by completely different pressures and beliefs. The motivations that drive ancient Egyptians would be alien to Tommy, and his attempts to predict or influence behavior would backfire spectacularly. As years pass in ancient Egypt, Tommy would face the ultimate challenge, not just surviving in the ancient world, but accepting that this is his world now. The modern world he knew is not just far away. It doesn't exist yet. It won't exist for thousands of years. This isn't temporary exile. This is permanent displacement. Tommy's memories of Vice City would gradually take on a dreamlike quality. Did he really once own a mansion overlooking the ocean? Did he really once command fear and respect from dangerous men? Did he really once solve problems by shooting them? The ancient Egyptian reality would be so overwhelming that his modern life would seem like a fantasy. The seasonal floods of the Nile would become a metaphor for Tommy's existence. Periodic events that wash away everything he's built, forcing him to start over again and again. Each flood would reset his progress, destroy his accumulated goods, scatter his relationships. He'd live in cycles of building and losing, hoping and despairing. Tommy's famous ability to learn from experience would be hampered by the fact that ancient Egyptian experience doesn't translate to modern principles. The lessons of ancient Egypt are specific to ancient Egypt. Learning to navigate bureaucracy based on divine authority doesn't teach you anything useful about governance. Learning to survive in a subsistence economy doesn't provide insight into modern finance. The complete absence of options would be perhaps the most maddening aspect of Tommy's situation. In Vice City, there were always alternatives, always another angle to work, always a way out if you were smart enough and tough enough. In ancient Egypt, options are limited by birth, by law, by divine decree, by the simple facts of technology and geography. Tommy's famous confidence, which carried him through every challenge in Vice City, would gradually erode under the constant pressure of failure, humiliation, and helplessness. The man who once walked into any room knowing he was the most dangerous person there would learn what it means to be the most vulnerable. The language barrier would never fully disappear. Even if Tommy learned to speak ancient Egyptian, he'd never truly understand it. The cultural concepts, the religious references, the social nuances that give language its real meaning. He'd always be translating, always missing subtleties, always saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. Tommy's relationship with death would undergo a complete transformation. In Vice City, death was something he dealt out to others or avoided through planning and firepower. In ancient Egypt, death would be a constant presence, Mornis diseases, accidents, violence, starvation. He'd live always on the edge of mortality, with no way to protect himself beyond luck and prayer. The complete lack of feedback would torture Tommy's goal-oriented mind. In Vice City, he could measure success: money earned, territory controlled, enemies defeated. In ancient Egypt, success is simply surviving another day. There's no scoreboard, no metrics, no way to know if you're winning or losing except by the basic fact of continued existence. Tommy's famous networking ability, which built connections across Vice City's criminal underworld, would be useless in a society where networks are built over generations through family, marriage, and religious ties. You can't network your way into ancient Egyptian society. You're either born into it, or you're forever on the outside. The seasonal nature of hope in ancient Egypt would replace Tommy's modern sense of continuous possibility. Hope comes with the flood season, with the harvest, with religious festivals. Between these moments, life is just endurance. Tommy would have to learn to live without constant optimism, to find meaning in mere survival. As we near the end of our exploration of Tommy Vercetti's impossible situation, one final truth emerges. The question isn't really whether Tommy would survive ancient Egypt. It's whether Tommy would remain Tommy. The man who entered the ancient world would not be the man who adapted to it. The pressures of ancient Egypt would break down everything that made Tommy who he was and rebuild him as someone else entirely. In the end, Tommy Vercetti wouldn't die in ancient Egypt. He'd disappear, replaced by someone who looks like him, but thinks like an ancient Egyptian, who remembers Vice City but lives according to the Nile's rhythms, who speaks English but dreams in hieroglyphs. The greatest tragedy of Tommy's situation wouldn't be death, it would be transformation, the loss of self that comes from living too long in a world that was never meant for you. Tommy Vercetti would survive ancient Egypt by ceasing to be Tommy Vercetti. So as you drift off to sleep tonight, consider this final thought. We are all products of our time, shaped by forces we rarely acknowledge, dependent on systems we barely understand. Strip away the context that makes us who we are, and what remains. Tommy's story in ancient Egypt is really all our stories. The question of what lies beneath the surface when everything we depend on is taken away. Sweet dreams, and remember, the strongest person in one world might be the weakest in another, but perhaps more disturbing still is the possibility that they might be neither strong nor weak, but simply unrecognizable. Rest well, thinking of Tommy Vercetti, who went to bed as the king of Vice City and woke up as a stranger to himself in a land where even his dreams speak a language he doesn't understand. But there's one more aspect of Tommy's ancient Egyptian ordeal that we haven't fully explored. The psychological transformation that would occur, not in months or years, but in the space between heartbeats, in the moment when reality fully sets in. Picture Tommy, perhaps a week into his Egyptian nightmare, sitting by the Nile as the sun sets, watching families of farmers return from their fields. Children run alongside donkeys loaded with grain. Mothers carry water jugs with practiced ease. Fathers joke with each other in a language that sounds like music to some ears, but noise to Tommy's. And in that moment, watching this scene of normalcy, Tommy would experience something worse than physical pain, worse than hunger, worse than heat. He would experience the complete and utter irrelevance of his former life. Every empire Tommy built in Vice City was built on the foundation of modernity, electricity, telecommunications, modern banking, legal systems, transportation networks, weapon technology. Remove that foundation, and the empire doesn't just collapse. It becomes retroactively impossible. It's as if Tommy's entire life in Vice City was a dream, and ancient Egypt is him waking up. The goods Tommy once trafficked, meat, cocaine, weapons, stolen cars, don't just become unavailable in ancient Egypt, they become inconceivable. The concept of moving tons of cocaine across international borders becomes meaningless when the known world consists of a strip of fertile land along one river. The idea of automatic weapons becomes absurd when the height of military technology is bronze-tipped spears. The notion of stolen luxury cars becomes laughable when the pinnacle of transportation is a wooden boat or a trained donkey. Tommy's former businesses would sound like fantasy to ancient Egyptians. Strip clubs, they'd wonder what profit could come from watching people remove clothes everyone already barely wears. Drug dealing, they'd point out that beer already exists and is safer than water. Protection rackets, they'd explain that Pharaoh already provides protection from bandits and foreign invaders. Money laundering, they'd be confused by the very concept of money that needs washing. The social problems Tommy once exploited, urban alienation, consumer culture, bureaucratic corruption, wealth inequality, either don't exist in ancient Egypt, or exist in forms so different as to be unrecognizable. Urban alienation makes no sense in a society where everyone knows everyone in their village. Consumer culture is impossible when most people own nothing beyond the clothes on their backs. Bureaucratic corruption requires bureaucracy first, and ancient Egyptian administration is based on personal relationships and divine authority, rather than modern institutional structures. Tommy's psychological toolkit, so finely tuned to Vice City's environment, would not just be useless but actively misleading in ancient Egypt. His ability to read micro-expressions would fail because Egyptian facial expressions carry different cultural meanings. His understanding of power dynamics would backfire because Egyptian power comes from sources he doesn't recognize. His expertise in intimidation would get him killed because intimidation in ancient Egypt often provokes religious rather than practical responses. The very concept of success that drove Tommy in Vice City becomes meaningless in ancient Egypt. Success in Vice City meant accumulation, money, power, respect, territory. Success in ancient Egypt means continuation, money, not dying this year, not offending the gods, not bringing shame to your family, not disrupting the cosmic order. Tommy's competitive instincts would find no outlet in a society where the goal isn't to win but to maintain balance. Tommy's tools for problem solving, mind, violence, money, manipulation, technology, would be like trying to fix a broken bone with a hammer. Not just ineffective, but likely to make things worse. Ancient Egyptian problems require ancient Egyptian solutions which Tommy would be constitutionally unable to understand or implement. The information sources Tommy relied on in Vice City: news media, intelligence networks, financial reports, criminal contacts, have no equivalent in ancient Egypt. Information in ancient Egypt travels through gossip, religious proclamations, traveling merchants, and royal decrees. Tommy would be informationally blind in a world where the wrong information, or lack of information, could mean death. Tommy's relationships in Vice City were transactional, mindful, based on mutual benefit, shared interests, or mutual threats. But ancient Egyptian relationships are based on kinship, religious obligation, divine favor, and generations of family history. Tommy couldn't build relationships the way he was used to building them, and ancient Egyptian relationship building would require decades of patient investment with no guarantee of return. The feedback loops that allowed Tommy to learn and adapt in Vice City don't exist in ancient Egypt. In Vice City, if Tommy made a mistake, the consequences were immediate and clear. But in ancient Egypt, mistakes might have religious consequences that don't manifest for years, or cultural consequences Tommy isn't even aware of, or practical consequences that seem completely unrelated to their causes. Tommy's famous patience in Vice City was actually impatience by ancient Egyptian standards. Even Tommy's longest-term schemes in Vice City played out over months or years. In ancient Egypt, patient people plan for generations. They build temples that won't be finished in their lifetime. They plant trees their grandchildren will harvest. They maintain family obligations that stretch back centuries. The scope of Tommy's ambitions in Vice City would seem almost quaint by ancient Egyptian standards. Tommy wanted to control a city. Pharaohs controlled the known world and the afterlife. Tommy wanted to accumulate wealth. Pharaohs were wealth itself, owning everything and everyone in their kingdom. Tommy wanted respect. Pharaohs were worshipped as living gods. Tommy's strategic thinking in Vice City was based on controlling variable, eliminating uncertainty, gathering intelligence, planning for contingencies. But ancient Egyptian life is fundamentally about accepting uncertainty. The Nile might flood too much or too little. The harvest might succeed or fail. The pharaoh might live or die. The gods might be pleased or angry. Planning in ancient Egypt means preparing for possibilities, not controlling outcomes. The time horizons that govern Tommy's thinking in Vice City would be completely inadequate for ancient Egypt. In Vice City, Tommy thought in terms of quarterly profits, annual expansion, maybe 5-year plans. In ancient Egypt, important decisions are made with centuries in mind. Dynasties last for generations. Religious traditions stretch back thousands of years. Social changes happen over millennia. Tommy's understanding of cause and effect, so crucial to his criminal success, would be constantly challenged by ancient Egyptian cosmology. In Vice City, if Tommy shot someone, they died because bullets cause death. In ancient Egypt, if someone dies unexpectedly, it might be because they violated a religious taboo, or because a rival cursed them, or because the gods decreed it, or because their care was called to the afterlife. Physical causation takes a backseat to spiritual and mystical causation. The individual autonomy that Tommy fought so hard to achieve in Vice City doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. Your life belongs to Pharaoh, to the gods, to your family, to your village. The very idea of being a self-made man would be not just impossible, but sacrilegious. Tommy would have to learn to find identity and meaning, not in what he achieved, but in how well he fulfilled his assigned role in the cosmic order. Tommy's relationship with law in Vice City was complex. He broke laws, but understood them. He corrupted officials, but knew how the system worked. In ancient Egypt, law isn't a system of rules, but an expression of divine will. Makat, the principle of truth, justice, and cosmic order, can't be corrupted or circumvented. It simply is, like gravity or mathematics. The social mobility that allowed Tommy to rise from street thug to crime boss doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. You are born into your class and station, and while some movement is possible, it usually requires generations, and often depends more on divine favor than personal effort. Tommy couldn't climb his way to the top, because the top isn't a place you reach, it's a place you're born into. Tommy's relationship with risk in Vice City was about calculated gambles, understanding odds, managing exposure, diversifying operations. But risk in ancient Egypt is often beyond human control or calculation. Natural disasters, divine displeasure, royal caprice, military invasion. These aren't risks you can hedge against. They're facts of life you prepare for spiritually, rather than practically. The very concept of privacy that Tommy valued so highly in Vice City is alien to ancient Egyptian society. Your thoughts are known to the gods. Your actions are observed by neighbors. Your motivations are discussed by family. Your failings are recorded by bureaucrats. There's no escape into anonymity, no hiding behind corporate structures, no disappearing into the crowd. Tommy's methods of conflict resolution in Vice City, negotiation, intimidation, elimination, all assume that conflicts are between equals or near equals who can reach mutually beneficial solutions. But in ancient Egypt's rigid hierarchy, conflicts are often between people of vastly different status, and resolution comes through submission to authority rather than negotiated settlement. The economic principles that guided Tommy's success in Vice City as supply and demand, profit maximization, market efficiency, have no meaning in ancient Egypt's redistributive economy. Most economic activity is about ensuring everyone gets enough to survive rather than maximizing individual gain. The economy serves social and religious purposes, rather than purely profit motives. Tommy's ability to reinvent himself, which allowed him to go from Sonny's lieutenant to Vice City kingpin, would be impossible in ancient Egypt where identity is fixed by birth, family, and divine assignment. You can't become something different. You can only become a better or worse version of what you already are. The technological gap between Vice City and ancient Egypt would create a form of cognitive dissonance that goes beyond mere inconvenience. Tommy's brain, trained to think in terms of modern possibilities, would constantly generate solutions that require technology that won't exist for millennia. It would be like trying to design a computer program on a slate tablet. Tommy's understanding of human psychology, so crucial to his manipulation skills, was based on modern motivations, career ambition, social status, material comfort, personal freedom. But ancient Egyptians are motivated by different things: religious duty, family honor, cosmic balance, Pharaoh's approval. Tommy's psychological tools would be like keys to locks that don't exist yet. The very notion of progress that drove Tommy's ambitions in Vice City doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptians believe in cyclical time. What was will be again. What is has been before. The goal isn't to build something new, but to maintain something eternal. Innovation happens slowly, carefully, with great attention to precedent and tradition. Tommy's relationship with authority in Vice City was oppositional menace. He fought against it, corrupted it, or circumvented it. But in ancient Egypt, authority is divine, absolute, unchallengeable. You don't fight Pharaoh, you submit to Pharaoh. You don't corrupt priests, you seek their blessing. You don't circumvent the gods, you try to understand their will. As the months turned to years in Tommy's Egyptian exile, he would face the ultimate question, not just how to survive ancient Egypt, but how to find meaning in a world where everything that gave his life meaning is not just absent, but impossible. The skills that made him a king in one world make him a nobody in another. The values that drove him to greatness in one era make him a failure in another. Tommy Vercetti's story in ancient Egypt is ultimately about the illusion of self-determination. In Vice City, Tommy believed he was the master of his own destiny. In ancient Egypt, he would learn that destiny itself is shaped by forces far beyond individual control. The movement of stars, the flooding of rivers, the will of gods, the weight of tradition. The man who built an empire through pure force of will would discover that will itself is not enough when the world doesn't provide the tools that make will effective. Tommy's tragedy in ancient Egypt wouldn't be that he lacked intelligence, determination, or ambition. It would be that these qualities, so valuable in their proper context, become almost irrelevant when the context changes completely. In the end, Tommy Vercetti wouldn't just fail to conquer ancient Egypt. Ancient Egypt would conquer him, slowly and inexorably, until the man who once owned Vice City becomes owned by a world that exists on terms he can never truly accept, operated by rules he can never fully understand, toward purposes he can never completely embrace. So sleep well tonight, knowing that your smartphone, your car, your bank account, your legal rights, all the things that make you who you are, exist in a specific time and place, and that removed from that context, you, like Tommy, might discover that the person you think you are is really just a collection of circumstances that could disappear in the blink of an eye, leaving behind only the question of what, if anything, is left when everything you know is taken away. Rest peacefully, dreaming not of Tommy Vercetti the Vice City kingpin, but of whatever he became in ancient Egypt, stranger, slave, survivor, or perhaps simply another forgotten soul, ground down by the weight of time itself, until even his name was lost to the desert wind. But perhaps the most devastating realization for Tommy wouldn't come in his first day, or his first week, or even his first month in ancient Egypt. It would come in a quiet moment, maybe during the second year of his exile, when he finally understood the true nature of his predicament. Tommy would be sitting by the Nile, watching the sun set over a landscape that had remained unchanged for millennia, when it would hit him. He wasn't just physically displaced from Vice City, he was existentially erased from it. Every deal he made, every empire he built, every person he influenced in Vice City, continued to exist without him. But as far as he was concerned, they might as well be in another dimension. The Tommy Vercetti, who ruled Vice City, had become a ghost, haunting a ghost. In Vice City, Tommy's power came from his connections, corrupt cops who fed him information, judges who could be bought, politicians who owed him favors, businessmen who feared him, criminals who respected him. But these weren't just professional relationships. They were threads in a complex web that defined his place in the world. Cut all those threads simultaneously, and Tommy doesn't just lose his power, he loses his context for understanding what power even means. The temporal aspect of Tommy's displacement would create a unique form of existential horror. In Vice City, Tommy could always plan for the future, because the future was an extension of the present. Technology would advance, opportunities would arise, situations would evolve. But in ancient Egypt, the future is just more of the same. Endless cycles of flood and drought, planting and harvest, birth and death. Tommy's future-oriented mindset would have nowhere to go. Tommy's relationship with violence in Vice City was clean, modern, efficient, pull a trigger, problem solved. But violence in ancient Egypt is messy, personal, ritualistic. Executions are public spectacles involving religious ceremony. War involves hand-to-hand combat with primitive weapons. Even murder is often seen as a spiritual transgression, requiring religious purification, rather than just disposal of a body. The concept of retirement, that many modern criminals aspire to, making enough money to disappear to somewhere comfortable, doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. There's no beach house to retire to, no offshore accounts to access, no plastic surgery to change your appearance. You work until you die, and if you're lucky, you die quickly, rather than slowly starving or succumbing to disease. Tommy's famous suits, which were both armor and advertisement in Vice City, would become a source of constant ridicule in ancient Egypt. Clothing in ancient Egypt is purely functional, protection from sun, sand, and social judgment. The concept of fashion as personal expression or status symbol exists only among the highest elite, and Tommy would never be high elite. The music that formed the soundtrack to Tommy's life in Vice City, rock, pop, Latin rhythms, would be replaced by the monotonous chanting of work songs, religious hymns, and funeral dirges. The vibrant audio landscape of Vice City, full of cars, radios, voices, and urban energy, would be replaced by the sounds of animals, wind, water, and human labor. Tommy's sexual relationships in Vice City were transactional, recreational, or strategic. But sexual relationships in ancient Egypt are regulated by religious law, family tradition, and social hierarchy. Marriage is an economic and social arrangement between families, rather than a choice between individuals. Tommy's modern attitudes towards sex and relationships would be not just inappropriate, but possibly criminal. The drugs that facilitated Tommy's lifestyle in Vice City don't exist in ancient Egypt. No cocaine to provide energy and confidence, no alcohol stronger than weak beer, no painkillers for injuries beyond herbal remedies that are often useless. Tommy would have to face every challenge, every pain, every disappointment, completely sober and alert. Tommy's legal knowledge, which helped him navigate Vice City's criminal justice system, would be worse than useless in ancient Egypt. Ancient Egyptian law is based on precedent, divine will, and Pharaoh's decree. There are no constitutional rights, no standardized procedures, no appeals process. Justice is whatever the person in authority says it is. The environmental pollution that Tommy barely noticed in Vice City would be replaced by different, but equally challenging environmental hazards in ancient Egypt. Sandstorms that can blind and suffocate, flash floods that can destroy entire villages, plagues of locusts that can devastate crops, diseases spread by insects and contaminated water. Tommy's ability to delegate, which allowed him to manage a large criminal organization, would find no outlet in ancient Egypt, where delegation requires family relationships, religious authority, or royal appointment. You can't just hire competent people, you have to be related to them, blessed by them, or born superior to them. The customer service expectations that existed even in Vice City's criminal underworld, reliability, quality, professional standards, don't exist in ancient Egypt's subsistence economy. You get what you get, when you get it, in whatever condition it arrives, and you're grateful, because the alternative is often nothing at all. Tommy's understanding of basic economics, inflation, supply and demand, market forces, would be constantly frustrated by ancient Egypt's regulated, religiously influenced economy. Prices are often set by tradition or royal decree, rather than market forces. Hoarding is not just economically punished, but religiously forbidden. The concept of insurance that protected Tommy's assets and operations in Vice City doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. No insurance against crop failure, theft, injury, or death. Your only insurance is divine favor, family support, and community goodwill, none of which Tommy could reliably obtain as a foreigner. Tommy's facility with numbers, which helped him manage complex financial operations in Vice City, would be challenged by ancient Egyptian mathematics and accounting. Numbers are written in hieroglyphs, calculations are done without modern notation, and record-keeping is primitive and unreliable. The medical privacy that Tommy could maintain in Vice City, choosing his doctors, keeping his health problems secret, doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. Medical treatment is often public, performed by priest-physicians who record everything, and involving family and community members as caregivers and witnesses. Tommy's relationship with his own body would undergo a radical transformation. In Vice City, his body was a tool for pleasure, combat, and intimidation. In ancient Egypt, his body would become a constant source of worry, pain, and limitation. Every cut could become infected, every illness could be fatal, every injury could leave permanent damage. The technological determinism that shaped Tommy's worldview in Vice City, the idea that problems can be solved with better technology, would be shattered in ancient Egypt. Most problems in ancient Egypt are solved by human endurance, divine intervention, or accepting that some problems can't be solved at all. Tommy's brand management, so crucial to his success in Vice City, would be impossible in ancient Egypt, where reputation is built over generations through family accomplishments, religious devotion, and service to Pharaoh. You can't rebrand yourself, you are what you are born to be. The global perspective that Tommy developed through his international criminal connections would shrink to a view bounded by the Nile Valley. The world beyond Egypt, largely unknown, unreachable, and irrelevant to daily survival. The psychological isolation Tommy would experience goes beyond mere loneliness. In Vice City, even when alone, Tommy was connected to a web of relationships, references, shared experiences. In ancient Egypt, he would be truly alone. Midas cut off not just from people, but from an entire way of understanding the world. Tommy's problem-solving methodology in Vice City relied on modern tools, surveillance equipment, communication devices, computer records, forensic evidence. In ancient Egypt, problems are solved through divination, oracle consultation, ritual purification, and trial by ordeal. Tommy's rational, empirical approach would be not just ineffective, but seen as impious. The seasonal religious festivals that punctuate ancient Egyptian life would confuse and frustrate Tommy. In Vice City, time was money and efficiency was king, but in ancient Egypt, entire weeks are devoted to religious observance. When no work gets done, no trade occurs, no travel happens. Tommy would have to learn patience on a scale incomprehensible to modern minds. Tommy's competitive instincts, which drove him to dominate Vice City's criminal underworld, would find no healthy outlet in ancient Egypt. Competition exists, but it's about religious devotion, service to Pharaoh, or family honor. Concepts foreign to Tommy's materialistic worldview. The concept of intellectual property that protected Tommy's criminal innovations in Vice City doesn't exist in ancient Egypt. Ideas, methods, techniques, these belong to their creators, only insofar as others choose to acknowledge that ownership. Tommy couldn't patent his criminal methods or trademark his organizational structures. Tommy's understanding of loyalty, built on mutual benefit and shared risk in Vice City, would be challenged by ancient Egypt's loyalty structures based on kinship, divine mandate, and eternal obligation. The loyalty Tommy inspired through fear and reward would be impossible to replicate in a society where loyalty is inherited rather than earned. The urban anonymity that Tommy could exploit in Vice City, the ability to disappear into crowds, to maintain multiple identities, to operate under false names, doesn't exist in ancient Egypt's face-to-face society, where everyone knows everyone, and strangers are immediately noticeable. Tommy's famous temper tantrums, which could clear rooms and terrify subordinates in Vice City, would make him a laughingstock in ancient Egypt, where emotional control is valued above all else. Public displays of anger are seen as signs of weakness, lack of divine favor, or possession by malevolent spirits. The mechanical precision that marked Tommy's best criminal operations in Vice City would be impossible in ancient Egypt, where everything is done by hand, by feel, by approximation. Nothing is standardized, nothing is exactly measured, nothing is precisely timed. Tommy's relationship with death would transform completely. In Vice City, death was often quick, sometimes unexpected, but usually comprehensible. In ancient Egypt, death is omnipresent, slow, often preceded by obvious warning signs, and surrounded by elaborate religious explanations and ceremonies. The waste products of Tommy's Vice City lifestyle, broken machines, outdated electronics, discarded luxury items, would seem miraculous in ancient Egypt, where nothing is thrown away. Everything is reused, repaired, or repurposed, until it literally disintegrates. Tommy's sophisticated understanding of supply chains, which allowed him to move drugs and weapons efficiently through Vice City, would be useless in ancient Egypt, where supply chains are personal relationships between families and villages, operating on trust and tradition, rather than contracts and payment. The information security that protected Tommy's operations in Vice City would be impossible in ancient Egypt, where secrets are kept through personal loyalty and religious oaths rather than encryption and compartmentalization. Tommy would have to learn to trust people in ways his criminal experience taught him never to trust anyone. Finally, Tommy would face the ultimate psychological challenge, accepting that his Vice City self was not his true self, but merely one possible version of himself, shaped by specific circumstances. In ancient Egypt, stripped of everything modern, he would be forced to discover what, if anything, remains, when all the external markers of identity are removed. The man who once declared, "I'm not a businessman, I'm a businessman," would learn that business itself is a modern concept, that the self can exist without enterprise, that identity persists, even when everything that seemed to define it disappears into the sand. And so Tommy Vercetti would end not with a bang but with a whimper, not dying gloriously, in a hail of bullets, like a Vice City crime boss, but simply fading into the anonymous masses of ancient Egypt, one more foreigner ground down by time, heat, disease, and the weight of a world that never knew who he used to be, and never cared who he could have been. Years would pass, and Tommy would age rapidly under the Egyptian sun. His hair would grey and thin, his skin would darken and wrinkle, his body would bend under the weight of constant labor. The man who once strutted through Vice City in expensive suits would shuffle through Egyptian villages in worn sandals and a dirty tunic, and one day, in his final moments, lying on a mat in some anonymous mud brick hut along the Nile, Tommy would close his eyes and perhaps see Vice City one last time, the neon lights, the ocean breeze, the purr of engines, the respecting people's eyes. But when he opened them again, there would be only the brown walls of ancient Egypt, the smell of dung and dust, the sound of prayers to gods he never believed in. Tommy Vercetti would die as he lived his final years, forgotten, anonymous, irrelevant, just another foreigner who came to Egypt and was absorbed by it, leaving behind no trace, except perhaps his bones in the sand, and a few confused stories told by locals about the strange man who spoke a language no one could understand, and seemed to think he was somebody important. The king of Vice City would become nothing more than fertilizer for next year's grain crop, his atoms recycling into the eternal cycle of life and death along the Nile, and the world would continue as if Tommy Vercetti had never existed at all, which in the cosmic scale of ancient Egypt, he might as well have not. Sleep well tonight, knowing that we are all just one temporal displacement away from Tommy's fate, that everything we think makes us important exists only in the narrow slice of time and space we call home. Strip away that context, and we might discover that the only thing that truly survives is the human capacity to endure, to adapt, and ultimately to disappear with barely a trace into the vast indifference of history itself.